Good morning and welcome to the Atlantic Council. As you know, each year and even each season, the Atlantic Council organized under the leadership of Geoeconomic Center run by Josh Lipsky, a high-level interview series on the occasion of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank spring meetings. This year, together with my team, I'm honored for the Africa Center to kick off these week's events with discussions featuring important speakers. We'll host not less than 15 speakers, from Carlos Lopez to Donald Kaberuka, from Alexa Latotu from the U.S. Treasury to the Finance Minister of Ghana, or in 1 hour, the new Economy Minister of Senegal. But for the time being, I'm happy to open this series with His Excellency Alamine Ousmane Mey, Minister of Economy, Planning and Regional Development for Cameroon. The conversation will be moderated by Julian Pequet, a veteran reporter and the Washington, D.C. UN correspondent from the Africa Report. Minister Mey, welcome to the Atlantic Council. Minister Mey has an extensive record in the fields of economic planning and financial management. Prior to entering his current role, he held the position of finance minister. He has also previously worked as the general manager of the African First Bank. He also serves as the chairman of the board for the Cameroon Gatsby Foundation, the sister trust of the UK-based NGO Gatsby Charitable Foundation, and of the Central African Venture Capital Fund. Today, the conversation will focus on several important issues, from the economic trajectory of your country, Minister Mey, to your bilateral relationship with the US in the context of strong competition with other global powers and war in Ukraine, but also the issue of the upcoming IMF-World Bank spring meetings. The context is historic. Is it possible to reform these organizations as stated by Secretary Yellen in this very place 1 year ago? That is the question. Minister Mey, I thank you for joining us here at the Atlantic Council. Welcome to Washington, D.C. too. We look forward to sharing your insights with our audience. Julian, over to you for the next 25 minutes.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mr. Mey, as we just heard, you were finance minister before you were economy minister from 2011 to 2018. So as we were talking before the show, this is your 12th set of IMF World Bank meetings. Can you run us really quickly about, what you expect to be doing this week and how this moment is different from perhaps other spring meetings?
First of all, let me, Julian, express my gratitude to Ambassador Ramayad for the invitation to Atlantic Council at this junction in time when we are starting World Bank and IMF spring meetings. Certainly, 12 years of experience, it's a lot, but each year it's a different environment based on the topic to be addressed. Of course, as governor of the World Bank this time around, we are keen to talk about the future of the institution. We'll be having a new president. We'll talk about the reform of this institution to be able to match with current challenges, global public goods that are particularly important for the world community this time around.
Okay. Before we get into the reform agenda for the Bretton Woods institutions, I wanted to talk a little bit about the situation, the national situation in Cameroon. So the IMF says that economic recovery from COVID is well underway. Growth is expected to reach 4.3% in 2023. The fund, however, is warned that recovery is subject to, and this is a quote from the IMF, greater risks with spillovers from Russia's war in Ukraine, including inflationary pressures, supply chain disruptions, tightening of global financial conditions. So can you talk a little bit about your assessment of the economic situation in your country and the kind of support that you are seeking from the IMF, the World Bank, and also the U.S. government while you're here this week?
Julian, you're right when you picture the situation we are currently in. The last 3 years have been challenging for all the world, of course, due to COVID-19, as well as the crisis in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine. But Cameroon, during this period, this tough period, has been very resilient. We have been able to maintain our growth rate around 3.5%. 2020, when we were hit by the crisis, the COVID-19, we were able to get to 0.5% growth rate. So this has shown how diversified our economy is and how resilient this economy is. Of course, 4.3% growth rate 2023 is a good figure, but not enough for us to get to our goals to become an emerging country by 2035. This is the reason why we are here in Washington to continue our conversation around our economic plan to be able to continue to spur growth, inclusive, strong, robust, and also talk about financing our projects, our programs, our development process with the World Bank and different other partners. We are working on the issues around disruption caused by the crisis in Ukraine, and we will be able to deliver probably much better in terms of national, internal resources to be able to cover priority projects and services expected by our population. This is a paradigm shift that's taking place. We learned from the crisis, and we want to take advantage of the situation to re-engineer our production capacity to be able to produce more locally, cover the national demand, and export more in this environment. So this is the challenge we are facing, but we have our partners supporting us in doing that.
Right. And we'll talk soon about, the relationship with the U.S. and helping you get there. But first, I want to talk a little bit about, what the IMF is recommending, that you widen the tax base, implement some structural reforms, and cut back on fuel subsidies, like they're asking a lot of countries in Africa to do. What is your plan for doing so while mitigating the, negative impact on the population?
Of course, the current crisis requires a lot of actions from our government. We have been putting in place a plan supported by the IMF through extended credit facility and extended a mechanism for credit to our country. On subsidies, last year we were, as a government, able to cover 1.3 billion subsidies for our population, just to ease the burden of inflation and continue to maintain economic growth adequately. But it's not possible to take place for a long time. Budgetary, we have to be able to sustain these expenses. And this year, in 2023, we raised the level of fuel prices as well as revenue for the civil servant as well as minimum wages. So we balance reduction of subsidies and revenue increase for the population to be able to cope with the situation we are going through. Of course, this is just part of the solution. In the long run, we want to expand our tax basis through generation of revenue locally, investing in industrialization, and being able to move from the position we are today, 13% of our GDP in terms of revenue collection from taxes. We need to go a step further to 13, 14, 16%. While doing so, we work on also reforms that are important for the environment, to be able to attract more private sector investment that will lead to industrialization, that will lead to job creation, and reinforce our resilience against future shocks.
Got it. Your country remains at high risk of debt distress, according to the IMF. Chad, Ethiopia, Zambia, now Ghana have joined this G20 common framework. Is that something that you're looking at all? If the common framework starts to work better for these different countries, are you looking at other options? What's your take on debt relief talks and how they should be approached?
3 points about debt. The first one is our debt level is at 43% of our GDP, below the 70% GDP of our common economic community. So we are half the way to reach the threshold, which is a threshold we want to avoid. Having said that, on debt sustainability assessment, our debt service coverage from export needs to be improved. This is the reason why we are ranked as high distress risk position. But we work to be able to improve on our export through import substitution policies to reduce imports, produce more, export more. This will give us better room for debt service coverage. On framework, a common framework for debt restructuring, I believe that this has been a good initiative when we were in the crisis situation in 2020. Debt service suspension initiative was one of the aspects we took in our country to be able to reduce the burden of debt services. This is certainly one thing we should include in the reform of the financial architecture in the future, such that when there is a crisis, we should not go through conversation to be able to trigger this a clause in suspending debt services for 2 years, for instance, and to make people and countries use the liquidity to fund priority operation. The common framework is a good initiative, but it has taken a long time. If it is a crisis response, this should take place as quick as possible. It's not the case. Certainly, if we continue to work on it and include this aspect in the long term, not as only ad hoc solution, but a structural solution, then we'll be able to probably equip the world community financially with instruments that are going to help in case of crisis.
Got it. So a more structural framework for debt
Definitely.
relief. Yeah. You're here in Washington 4 months after the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. President Biya was here in person. What do you make of U.S. engagement since then? We've talked a lot about a return to deeper relationship under President Biden. There's been 5 top-level U.S. visits to the continent since the beginning of January. What can you tell us about the sectors and projects where you would like to see more U.S. engagement, and also anything that you can tell us in terms of who you might be meeting with in the U.S. government or other U.S. partners this week?
I think, as many people, of course, that this initiative was a commendable initiative. It has reconnected with the 2014 initiative of President Obama. But I believe that this time around, the pledges are very clear. And these pledges are going towards more resources to fund priority areas in terms of health, education, energy, digital transformation. I think $350 million has been pledged by the President Biden to fund digital transformation, and $55 billion was also pledged to support the continent for a period of 3 years. This is certainly a huge amount, but I believe also that the request, the expectation, the needs on the continent in terms of infrastructure requires that we go beyond this level of resources. What has been done so far? I think on the security, the G5 Sahel countries have received support from the U.S. government. It is something commendable, but we need to accelerate on the delivery in terms of funding green transformation, industrial development, promoting the small and medium-sized enterprise development, PPPs, and putting in place the right environment that's going to lead to U.S. companies to invest on the continent. One thing we should also commend is the decision by President Biden to create the President Advisory Council for African diaspora. This will lead also to take advantage of the diaspora, which is available, keen to invest, keen to give back, keen to really contribute to the development of the continent. And these 3 aspects combined will certainly lead to a better development of the continent. But 2 things I should mention. One is we should move from the narrative to be really very operational. Second, we should also try to find the right level of resources needed, because the continent is probably the place where more resources are needed for the development, using these resources to fund infrastructure, human capital development, health, education, access to social services like water supply, electricity. So I think that the trend is the good one. The initiative is welcomed, and the continent is going to receive support through African Union, but also bilaterally with respect to relations between the 2 countries, Cameroon, for instance, with U.S. We hope that this summit should be followed by clear, robust, very visible actions.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting what you talked about, the long-term engagement, the narrative versus making this operational. As you know, the U.S. presidential campaign is going to be starting pretty soon by the end of the year. And we had seen, this shift away from Africa under the previous president. Now we're back to engaging. You look at a country like China, they're constantly going to Africa. There is a long-lasting, institutionalized relationship there. I was wondering what your message is to the Americans in terms of, convincing Africa that we are engaged for the long term, that it's not going to be, in with one president, out with another. How important is it to have that sense that, that engagement is real and lasting and will survive different administrations?
I mean, the current situation on the continent, it's not a continental concern, it's a global concern. We should consider the continent not as an area of influence, but a part of the world we need to engage in terms of cooperation for the development of both parties, both stakeholders. Not only the continent, but the rest of the world will benefit from a continent which is more developed, which has a very strong prospect for its population. By the end of the century, more than 40% of the population will be on the continent. And compared to East Asia, for instance, where within 30 years, the level of poverty has been reduced substantially. In the contrary, on the continent, due to recent crises, the losses caused by climate change, we are going to face huge challenges in terms of poverty development. So we think that we can partner with Africa to do business, but we are also solving problems which are of global nature, and these are risks for the entire world. So we believe that there is good reasons to be in a very strong partnership with the continent, and also good reason to do business on the continent because of the opportunities available.
Got it. You talked about, your desire for your country to do more in terms of exporting. President Trump had suspended your country's participation in the duty-free access to the United States, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, back in 2019. I understand that we are now starting, negotiations with the Biden administration in terms of re-entering AGOA. Can you talk a little bit about, where those things stand, how important AGOA is to your country in terms of access to the U.S. market?
Certainly, Julian, AGOA is important for our country and for our continent, and this is the reason why the conversation has resumed with the U.S. government to be able to enter the U.S. market. So we are working on that, but I also want to mention that on the continental level, we are working to create the African Continental Free Trade Area, just because we believe also that to be a resilient economy, we should be able to diversify our destination in terms of market. This is the reason why we appreciate the discussions going on with our partners, be it the US, be it the UK or Europe, but we also work on the continent to integrate more the continent and trade much more between countries of the continent to be able to face shocks when they come, because certainly we don't know when, but we'll be facing challenges along the road.
Mm-hmm. Is there any progress on AGOA at all that you can mention? Or
so far, the discussion is ongoing, and we hope to come to conclusion as quick as possible. We all are going to benefit from that. Not only Cameroon, because when we export a garment to U.S. or transform product to U.S., it is the consumer of the U.S. economy who is benefiting, and we are also having on our side a producer who are going to have received revenue from consumers coming from the U.S. So it's a win-win solution, and all the issues that have been raised, we are working in a very transparent, open manner with our partners to be able to iron it and solve the problems if there are any problems.
One of the events that President Biya participated in during the Africa Leaders Summit was the first ever U.S. Africa Space Forum. I know back in 2019, your country had announced plans to establish a national space program, CamSpace. I'm just wondering, where we are, if there's been any progress. There was a discussion around the need for African satellites, technology transfers from the West. But what's the status of those talks around, U.S. African partnership around space?
I mean, the discussion is also ongoing, and you have two parties. We are talking about digital transformation. We are talking about space technology, which are very high-tech as well as capital-intensive operations. So we believe at the continental level, the needs are there. And the interest to have this technology and know-how is also there. We hope that with our partners, with U.S., which has pledged $350 million to support digital transformation on the continent, we'll be able to kickstart this initiative, because technology, artificial intelligence, computers, digitalization, these are cross-border operations that are going to improve on our competitiveness, create more opportunity for our population, and bring us, in terms of connectivity, together with the rest of the world. So, work in progress. The commitment is there from both sides, but we need to accelerate by putting in place the right framework and the resources needed.
Okay. For the last part of our discussion, I do want to talk about the reform agenda for international financial institutions. It seems that, there are a lot of friends of Africa right now saying the right things. You've got the Prime Minister of Barbados and her Bridgetown initiative. You've got, the IMF managing director is from a developing country. AJ Banga is taking over the World Bank, and he is, has a lot of experience in the developing world. So it seems, and of course, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has been calling for overhauling World Bank lending to help developing countries, including in Africa, deal with climate change, pandemics, other, global concerns. But I'm wondering, from your point of view, is this a conversation about Africa that is once again happening without the Africans? Is that a concern?
Yeah, you're right in putting the question that way. Are we talking about Africa without Africa? This is a question, but Africa will make sure that it's on board. I do hope that this statement made by these prominent people you refer to are very critical for the future of the world. We are talking about the financial architecture to be probably adapted to the current situation. Let me take just the example of the World Bank. We are following two twin goals, ending extreme poverty as well as promoting shared prosperity. Mm-hmm. But on that, we should reasonably add new challenges, probably existing one, but we did not have them at the forefront of our agenda so far. This is climate change, this is vulnerability, inequalities, and pandemics that have plagued probably all what we have been doing so far to reduce poverty on the continent. So the vision should be extended to new challenges because of the reality we are facing. Certainly also the operational model should be adapted to the new realities, because we need to add sustainability, resilience, and inclusion in the development process and in the country program framework established to really be used as the framework of development finance. These issues are going to be on the agenda of the future president. I know the U.S. nominee is Banga, and the challenges ahead are very important. We have job unfinished on eradicating extreme poverty. We have job unfinished in promoting shared prosperity, and very challenging crisis in terms of climate change consequences on the world. Africa is the most hardest hit continent with respect to consequences of climate change. Losses economically, losses in biodiversity and ecosystem, and we cannot, if we have 17 out of 20 countries much vulnerable on the continent, tailor our institution without considering the continent. So certainly, the continent is producing, is contributing less to pollution, to climate change, but it's suffering more than the polluter of the world. So I believe that if you want to be reasonable and if you want to be more efficient, we should bring on the board those countries and the continent which is more affected. And I think that the continent is going to be more vocal, using African Union as well as regional institution, organization, to be able to talk about the realities we are facing, such that resilience, inclusion, sustainability is well considered with the voices of the African countries.
These regional institutions, does that include the development banks then, like the AFDB, African Bank? What is their role in all of this?
They are very important in not only promoting and advocating these issues, but they are very instrumental in providing the resources for the development of our continent. I believe that, for instance, using special drawing rights to strengthen the capacity of our local regional development banks such that they are able to leverage their financial capacity and later on lend to the countries at an affordable level in terms of financial condition. This will make us accelerate our development process, addressing infrastructure financing, health, education, water supply, energy, and of course, food security. So we think that there should be additionality. The World Bank is certainly very strong in finance development, but at the regional level, at the continental level, we need to equip our financial institution, multilateral development institution on the continent to be able to service adequately their member countries, such that our challenges to achieve sustainable development goals, to achieve the African Union Agenda 2063, we should be able to base the support to our countries on institutions regionally which are stronger than what they are today, with more firepower financially.
Got it. We have 2 minutes left. I want to ask you one last question on the cost of credit for African countries in particular. This has been a long-lasting discussion, but the UN Development Program is co-hosting an event this week on reforming how credit rating agencies determine sovereign creditworthiness, which of course, has a direct impact on how much it costs African countries to borrow. I'm just wondering really quickly where Cameroon stands on that issue.
Ratings agencies have a very important role to play, but their assessment should reflect in an accurate manner the situation of our countries. Otherwise, the premium that's going to be added to what we are looking for in terms of financial conditions is not going to be affordable. So we want credit agencies to be close to the field, to have better knowledge of the environment and the dynamics of the countries, such that their rating reflect accurately the situation. We are pushing towards promoting local credit agency, which probably are going to complement what existing credit agencies are doing already.
Got it. Well, we're running out of time, so thank you, Minister Mey, for joining us. We look forward to the results of your meeting this week. And to our viewers, please stay tuned for Economy Minister of Senegal, Oulimata Sarr, in 30 minutes on this channel. Thank you very much, Minister.
I thank you for having this conversation with me.